Today, I welcome Jason to the show where we're going to be talking about mental health, transformation, and much, much more. So, just a quick introduction to Jason, and then we'll dive into the conversation today. So, Jason is a certified psychotherapist and transformative coach who operates within a non pathologizing framework to help people discover their well-being. His journey began with a diagnosis at the age of 10, followed by forced medication for depression. By 13, he was a heroin addict, and by 20, he was in jail due to crime and drug related offences. Despite getting clean for a 12-step program, he continued to struggle with process addictions and mental health issues, leading to multiple instances of being sectioned. Initially, Jason sought to help others as a way to heal himself, but soon realised he could not effectively aid anyone. This then changed dramatically 7 years ago when he experienced an awakening that transformed his approach. Now he uses this experience as the foundation of his work in addiction, trauma, and mental health, guiding others to understand that they are not broken. So, Jason, welcome to the show. Glad to have you here, and you know, great to hear like all the work you're doing out there. So, I guess what I'd really like to know a little bit about is this awakening you had. Maybe a little bit about that and what it meant for you.
Yeah, I I think there's a little bit of information needed just before what happened because,
Sure.
um, I mean, when I listen to my bio, I think sometimes, well, was that really me? Did I really live like that? But it was quite horrific, to be honest. My early life, and then even when I became a psychotherapist, and like it said in that bio, that I couldn't affect. I really just wanted to understand myself, because I
Mm,
was always suffering. I suffered since I was a kid. I mean, there's so much more to the story. I lost my dad when I was a kid. I became a compulsive eater. I gained massive amounts of weight. I was sent to specialist doctors, put on diet pills,
mm,
kicked out of schools, just like I guess my mum just did not know what to do with me. So even before I found drugs, my life was chaotic. And then after I put drugs down, my life was chaotic again because drugs were really just the thing that soothed me. Food was the thing that
mm,
soothed me. So when I became a therapist as an attempt to help myself, because I really thought if I could understand this therapy thing that they're doing with me, then I would be able to help myself. Surely, it's
mm,
kind of makes perfect sense because I was on a quest for I was on a seeking quest for understanding my suffering and my knowing. So, but like long after getting a qualification as a psychotherapist and realizing that I can't really do anything here, I'm still suffering. And in fact, I met all these other therapists that were qualified, and in secrecy, they confided in me, and told me that they were still really suffering. You know what I mean? And
mm,
so I was thinking, hold on a minute. So the people who are helping people are still struggling. They can't really help themselves. Something's not right here. And I always felt this sense of um, what's the word I'm looking for? Just as imposter syndrome or a sense of fakeness. Like how could I help anyone if I couldn't even find happiness for myself? So that's why I kept seeking. And before that experience, I'd been on a lifetime quest. I'd been through everything. I'd done all the Tony Robbins's courses,
mm.
been to America doing all those. I'd done the Hoffman process, which was an intensive cathartic kind of experience. Landmark Forum. I trained in NLP, trained in CBT. I trained in person-centered therapy and in transactional analysis. I had a long list of like
Wow,
qualifications.
a lot.
It wasn't like I was I'd just done a weekend course on Facebook, like some people, and like real and thought I couldn't do it. I had a lot of credentials, but I was still suffering.
Mm,
And I ended up in this more spiritually aligned kind of it was called an intensive, but it wasn't very intense. It was quite relaxed. And I see that the conditions for creating transformation are relevant, because like often we get so caught up in our heads trying to work stuff out and find the answers, that we are actually can't even see something that's right in front of our face. And because we're so busy in our own mind, but it was a very relaxed experience. And I just had the transformational experience was that I realized that my whole life had been this projection of my own childhood trauma and this attempt to find outward success, and status and things like houses and relationships and cars and money and all these things, thinking that one day, if I got the right combination of these things or the right amount of these things, that I would feel okay inside. You know, my inside felt full of turmoil and self-hatred and lack of confidence, lack of self-worth, all the things that you talk about. It's kind of like I didn't have any of those things.
Mm.
And the realization was that in one day I had it all. It changed completely because I saw that life was not an outside in experience. It was not a case of getting your ducks in a row and finding the answer like I
Mm.
thought for my whole life. It was this realization that all this is happening. There's one common denominator for everyone at all times, and that is me. Me.
Mm.
I always talk, I'm this, I'm that, I'm this, I'm that. It's like, I want this, I want more of that. I'm always the central subject of my suffering, my wants, my needs, and my desires.
Mm.
So the realization was that this is happening inside of me, not outside of me. There's no answers. There's no amount of money that I'd ever got that had made me happy. There's no relationship I'd ever got that had made me happy. There's no place I'd ever got to on my weight loss journey that had made me happy. It was just an endless futile journey of goals, setting goals, getting there, finding no satisfaction, and setting another one. So that everything just collapsed, and I thought, shit, this is happening in me. It's not happening outside of me, and
Mm.
there's no satisfaction, there's no peace, there's no happiness, there's no joy in no accolade, in no credential, in no status, in no time, no amount of money. It's not possible. So the awakening was like, it's me. It's happening in me. It's kind of like, and it's all happening through my own perception. So I realized, like, the way I describe it is everything had looked yellow for my whole life, and I realized I was wearing yellow glasses. And I just took them off.
Mm.
It was kind of like, it was that simple, and so much changed in that transformational couple of days. It's like my life changed pretty unrecognizably, and it's still to this day, probably 7 or 8 years later, it still seems like a completely transformed life that I live compared to what happened. Like, that's why I say it sounds quite surreal when you read out that bio, because I think, wow, was that really me?
Mm. Wow. So yeah, it sounds like that had a massive impact on your perception of how you were seeing the world, or seeing your world, certainly from like the inside. And it is an inside out job, you mentioned there. I like the yellow glasses analogy as well, that you mentioned there.
Yeah.
So yeah, for like the individual, perhaps maybe a little bit rushing about, like try to fix all these things, and really stuck. Is there any kind of guidance you would offer? Would it just be to maybe sit with themselves? Is there would you like recommend going to one of these like retreats? I just wonder how we can kind of connect internally, because we've got a very big, busy world around us all the time.
Yeah. It's a good question, and it's often people want to go to the how do I question or how to
Mm.
question, because the mind wants to know, particularly like it's
It's
a
a good point.
very linear, logical kind of processing the brain. It's kind of like, give me the steps 1, 2, and 3, and I'll
Mm.
just do them, and then I'll get this. And it's like, we have to come out of that. We've got to
Mm.
come away from that. There's no steps 1, 2, and 3. They don't exist. It's kind of like anyone could give you what I call a plaster on a bullet hole solution, and many people will. I might call it. They might shoehorn you from A to B. It's like, but it's
Mm.
not going to be long-term transformation. Long-term transformation comes from slowing down enough to feel into and know yourself. Like slowing that process down. Stop noticing that the mind wants the answers now, and realizing that that's great for spreadsheets or your accountancy or your work life.
Mm.
It's the shittest tool in the box for knowing yourself, and knowing yourself emotionally, spiritually, and internally. It's you need to put that tool down and find a different tool. And I think that's the challenge for most of us, especially men. You talked about men's mental health. It's like we've got this um we've been indoctrinated into this societal belief as men, as a way that we have to be, and so on. And we've got a real tendency to use that brain to try and resolve all
Mm.
these emotional and spiritual issues and the trauma-based stuff that we've through the level of adversity that we've grown up in. using the same processing power that we use to make money or to do things in the world. It just doesn't work that way. And it's the most alien thing in the world for a man at first, when they first go on that internal journey, to start putting that tool down and to start going, well, how do you feel? Like, how do you feel in your body right now? What's happening? Where do you feel tension? What's going on there? You know, it's like it's an unnatural thing to go on that journey, but that's really where it starts. You know, the willingness to change the focus of direction from looking out in the world to where can I get more money? Where can I get a better relationship? How can I be better in the gym? How can I do all these things? To what's happening inside of me, what's happening inside of me right now, because that's
Mm.
my experience of life is happening now inside of me always. You know, it's not happening outside or later or when I get enough money or when I get the right girlfriend or when I get the right job or when I get the big enough house or the fast enough car or all those things that we make up where happiness exists where it doesn't, you know?
Mm. I really like that you touched on that, and yeah, I've certainly been guilty with a kind of project management background as well of usually overusing that brain. Right, it's like right, we're doing this, this, and this by this date. Okay, we're changing. Okay, all that kind of thing. So for me, it's been a big journey and a shift to try to get into that. Working with a somatic coach for the last year that I've done, getting into the body more and kind of like sensing things,
Mm.
and actually tuning into what I'm feeling. But it's always a work in progress. So I really like your point about the how there. Um, what I'm really interested in is like for like making decisions and like moving forward from that moment or even now. Do you tend to like lean into the body a lot for like how you're feeling about things, even if the brain's thinking something different?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question, you know, and it's like it's often again where we've used brain processing
Mm.
power, like a pros and cons list, for example,
Yeah.
you know, like and a decision. But um, the way I see it is, you either know or you don't know. You know, it's kind of like when it comes to a decision, and if you don't know, the only thing you need to do is wait. You know, no amount of brain processing will create like the best way forward. And you know, like wisdom, not intellectual wisdom, but wisdom as in our spiritual wisdom, ideas, new
Mm.
ideas that come through us, come when we allow ourselves enough space to come up for them to come through us. You know, so like when we're up in our heads and we're constantly processing, crunching lists, numbers, ideas, there's no space for ideas to come through. Um, you know, and sometimes decisions have to be made. Like, I don't know, let's say there's a practical implication of a decision. I need to make a financial decision and so on. So we just have to make a decision. You know, we can sometimes weigh things up. There's no right or wrong way of doing that. But from a life changing point of view, you know, it's kind of like, um, I've done this exercise loads of times, you know, with people. Sometimes people come to me with a decision to make, you know, as a coaching call. And I'll say, well, I'll tell you what, I'd say go away and just don't think about it. Don't think about it at all. Don't work it out. Don't
Mm.
sit down with it. Don't do anything, right? And see what happens. And I guarantee almost every time that they'll come back to me and say, oh, I was just walking the dog or I was just in the shower in the morning and this just came to me what to do. I just knew, you know, and it's like, so we
Interesting.
all have this source of wisdom that comes through all of us when we allow ourselves the space for it to come through. And we all have the capacity to overuse our brain's processing power to squash that wisdom back down, you know, because when you're up in your head, you've got no
Mm.
chance, no space for anything, you know. It's kind of like, and quite often it feels, you can tell by the feeling of it, you know, the stressiness of trying to make a decision that you feel pressure about and stuff. So it's kind of like it's an interesting area where spirituality and kind of business practicality kind of cross over, you know. But um, try it, you know. It's kind of like I don't ask anyone to take my word for this, you know. It's like quite often you might have even had this experience yourself. You go to bed with a problem, you really don't know what to do. You've been racking your brains. You wake up in the morning, jump in the shower, and you go, "Oh shit, yeah, I know what to do."
Mm.
Why does that happen? You know, because you've not been using your brain all night, crunching numbers, processing things. You know, you've allowed your mind to settle down, and the answers just come through us. You know.
Mm. Asking, yeah, sometimes when I found when I've asked the brain a question, and I've forgotten about the question, it's sometimes an answer appears out of like nowhere. as well. And yeah, I think something that worked for me is asking the brain a question, but not putting pressure on. Like I've got to work it out now. It's been a real effective one that's personally worked for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just takes you away from your capacity to have fresh thinking, fresh ideas, fresh insight that comes through you.
Hmm. Do you do like or kind of guide people you're working with to do many things to kind of get them into the body a little bit more out of the head?
Yeah, I guess you've done that. That's why you're asking, maybe. But like,
Yeah, I was just
yeah,
curious. Yeah.
yeah, it's like it depends. It's very easy for me to pick up on it because it's been my journey too, and it's like
Mm,
um many of us have learned and become adept at using this brain processing power. So I know as soon as I'm talking to somebody within 10 minutes that every answer they're giving me is from their head. And they've got, like, most people come to me and everything I ask them, where's your feelings? Where's this? Where's that? How do you experience yourself will happen here. And for anyone who's just on audio, I'm just highlighting the head, it just
yeah.
happens in the head. Now, if I say to them, well, what about what's going on below here? It's kind of like what's happening downwards from the head downwards.
Mm,
I don't know. No idea. No, because they're just so disconnected from it. So it's kind of like asking somebody to go, okay, let's do a little bit of breathing and find yourself a space in a chair, feel your body relax, right? And then it's kind of like going, right, tell me what's happening in your body. It's kind of like, and somebody might say, well, yeah, I feel really uncomfortable. My legs are restless, it's kind of like, and then going into that, what's happening, and there's so much going on behind that because the body is so good at escaping from our somatic experience. If you've done some somatic coaching, you probably have been into
mm,
stuff like this where the tension of the body just became a coping mechanism for trauma in life. And now it's just been like that for so long that we kind of don't even realize that that's how we're coping with our internal experience. So for me, it's essential. The answer is yes, it's essential. Take people into the body, see what's really going on, because the head can only do so much, and it's not really useful in a lot of this stuff. And this goes into everything, every from £1 million business decision, working with a company or a C-suite executive, through to a person who's been in a traumatic or toxic relationship that wants to leave, and everything in between. It's the same thing. It's happening inside of us.
mm. In the body. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
Mm. I know you did. It sounded like you did quite a lot of. It was Tony Robbins and Wim Hof you mentioned you'd done as well.
Done
Quite
that
a
as
lot of
well.
that.
Yeah, yeah, I've done that. Yeah,
A lot of experience.
I did the Hoffman process, but I've done Wim Hof as well. All that stuff. It's like um, before I had my experience, none of those things really meant anything to me because I used my head to try and process them.
Mm,
But after I had that experience and then started going more into the body and doing more somatic work, I I connected with everything and a lot more deeper. Like my original psychotherapy training many years ago, I would say when I qualified was useless because it was just in my head. I had
mm,
no idea of understanding it. But today, it's a completely different relational experience for anyone that I work with, because we're very present and we're present with what is in the moment. Could be the body's tension, could be feelings of emotion, could be existential and spiritual dilemmas. It could be any of those things.
mm. Do you do like do you with your clients do you guide them through anything like I'm just curious like journaling as well, or does it really depend on what the individual needs, or do you see that as kind of a more a head approach?
No, it's a good question. I mean, like it's not a linear. I definitely like
Again, yeah.
I don't have a non-linear approach. So like I tend to draw on my intuitive sense. It's like for some
Mm,
people who never journaled, who really unaware of themselves, it might be useful. But other people who wanted to write stuff down constantly and turned up everywhere with a notebook making notes, I would probably tell them to put it down and stop doing it. So
mm,
it's like it really depends on
mm,
your learned coping mechanisms, for life, your learned coping mechanisms for escaping yourself, the way that you have learned to be in the world and not be with it, not know yourself, not be in yourself, not feel and know yourself on that somatic level.
Mm, I love that. I think because I get a lot of feedback, and I've certainly been guilty of this myself. It's like, how long will it take to get over that, and what what are the steps? And I know there's various tools, and some tools resonate with me more than others. Others
Mm.
that they like tools which don't. But yeah, like working, going into the body more, and doing like breath work, and sometimes just getting realizations and things like breath work. Sometimes when I'm in the body, I'm like, oh my god, I've realized it, and it's it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. But yeah, what we've been talking about a bit today is like tuning into yourself even more, that inside in that inside out world a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, really
Breath work
appreciate.
does that too. That's what it
Mm,
does, right? It's like when your focus is on your breath, your focus is not on your mind and what you've got to do
mm,
tomorrow and what you did last week, the past and the future, which is where we
mm,
get lost. So you become present with yourself, and you that's like you said is the experience of an insight because you come out of your mind and
mm,
insights come through you. So breath work is another good way to bring yourself into the body, and start to become connected to yourself and know yourself.
mm. Awesome, Jason. So, Jason, just before we kind of wrap up today, obviously there's a lot more you're offering out to the world. I know you work with people and you're providing a lot. Where can are there any is there any final words or a point you'd like to share? And also, where can the listener find you if they want to find out a little bit more about your work or connect with you?
My website is wideworldcoaching.com,
Okay.
and podcast is called Misunderstandings of the Mind, which is very um, it's in line with what I've talked about today. It's sort of different spiritual understandings around commonly misunderstood personal development and mental health related subjects.
Mm,
So I bring this kind of inside out conversation to a lot of things like anxiety, addiction, relationships, connection, and all those
mm,
areas. Um, and if anyone feels resonant with it, like if somebody listens and they think, oh, that sounds good, it's kind of like, then that's where to find out more. And if anyone listens and thinks that's a load of rubbish, that's cool. It's kind of like because it doesn't resonate with everyone, like you
same.
said. We've all got our way of doing things.
Yeah, sure. No, that's great. You got a podcast out there and website, and same with this one. Doesn't resonate with everyone, but thank you for listening today. And Jason will be sure to link those up in the show notes so the listener can get in touch and or listen to some more wisdom from you. So appreciate you, Jason, for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. So that concludes our episode for today.